So just hold on. So are we
Not at
live?
all. I think we are. It says we're live. I've
That's
just got to
good.
renew.
It takes a little bit of time down here. Hopefully I don't have any.
Not at all. Yeah, we are. There we are. It says
Awesome.
we're live.
So
That's good.
we've got Guitar Hack waiting for us, Arvin waiting for us. We've got
Ben.
Ben saying g'day. Oh, and Simon Williams and Jimmy T.
Hi, Jimmy T. How you doing?
Yeah, Jimmy's an Aussie, so that's fantastic.
Oh, is he? Oh, right.
Um,
Okay.
sorry guys, we don't have Carl here today. Carl has a part-time job and it's taken a lot of energy out of him, so he's resting. So he's wished us well, and he'll watch the replay.
And the substitutes come in.
Yeah, well, look, I'm going to get to the point, Simon. So I've had a few messages. I've had a few messages from a few people, and there's been a few comments regarding the show from last week about the bombshell.
Bombshell.
The bombshell. The bomb.
The bomb at
So,
the end. Yes, it was keep the bomb for the end.
Simon, can you
So I'll
ta-
fill in some of the gaps. Yeah.
well, actually, paint the bloody whole picture.
Well, as I know, yes. Well, what as I've said before, my dad was a composer, and
Yes.
he did this. I've showed the Life on Earth thing. Well, as a result, alongside of that, or as a result of that, he'd also had a sort of slightly mad left field live electronics group called Uncle Jambo's Pendular Vibration. God knows where he got the name, but anyway. So basically, what it was, and I can show you a picture of it. What the people used to use. I don't know if people could see this. If I get very close, is that in focus? I can't tell.
That's good. If you just hold that up for another couple of seconds, because my
See,
ugly mug's jumped on.
oh, that's right. No, because you can see that's a picture of my dad, and beside him is this sort of trolley business with a VCS3 synthesizer, which is that kind of desky thing, and then various other pieces of equipment. And beside him, there's a sort of microphone. Now, what you did was that you've got a saxophone player or a player of acoustic instruments of some kind, trombone player, whatever, and you could play. Obviously, the microphone was connected into that sort of Heath Robinson sort of if basically a set of effects really, but
Wow.
kind of mad. So you feed your saxophone playing through the synthesizer, through the envelope shaping and all sorts of other stuff, and other delays, and I can't remember what else was on there to be honest, but a lot of other things. And you make a big sound. You can make a kind of big orchestral sound, and you. This is the late 70s, kind of thing. So when things were very Heath Robinson, and very, very Heath Robinson, as you can see from that picture, as wires and frames that my dad built himself and stuff to house all this stuff. And so, as I said, alongside my dad being a composer, he used to do kind of workshops and not tours is too grand a word, but the concerts and various events and happenings. He'd set them up with various people to do kind of live electronics improvisation stuff. It's quite sort of revolutionary in the mid-70s, late 70s kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he'd done this for a while, and hey, morning Sonia, morning R2, R3 locking nut in the chat, and Mitch Heyman, morning. So anyway, so we had this group alongside the sort of composing bit, and him and his then assistant, who's also a composer called Martin Kishko, and they sort of, my dad sort of, knew lots of people in the music business because he'd been around a while, and so he got invited in, I think about 85, I think it was. I had a look, and I think it was 85. He got invited to something called, this won't mean anything to you, the Huddersfield Music Festival. Huddersfield is a town in Yorkshire, in the north of England,
Yep.
which every year has a kind of music festival. Still happening now, I think. And they have 2 weeks when they get a load of musicians and stuff. They do a load of concerts, but also workshops for school kids and all sorts of other things. So anyway, my dad gets invited to this. So he takes along. I went along as kind of, assistant, roadie, carrier, whatever. I was in my last year at university, I think. So the summer of my last year, so I just finished university, I think in '85. So I wasn't really doing very much post student life. So he took along me and Martin Kishko, my fellow composer, but also, he also took along Tony Robinson, who's Baldric in Blackadder. You know Blackadder?
Wow. Yeah,
The
yeah,
British
absolutely.
comedy? Yeah.
That's a cult following
Yeah,
here.
cult thing. Yeah. I have a plan so cunning you could put a tail on it and call it a weasel, kind of thing, and all of that. but Tony used to live in Bristol. Tony Robinson used to live in Bristol, round the corner from my mum and dad, which is why they knew him. And he was involved a bit in local politics a long time ago. I mean, he hadn't changed his spots, by the way. He was a sort of Labour Party supporter then, and still is on the left now. So he stood for local council stuff. So my mum and dad knew him. So my dad got him to come and do. Obviously, some of this stuff was about spoken word stuff as well. So he got him, and he also got John Paul Jones, the man from Led Zeppelin, who in his outside of Led Zeppelin life, I don't know if is quite an inventive and experimental musician, and is interested in all manner of kind of. I went to see him recently, about 3 years ago, 3 or 4. No, actually more than that. My dad was still alive. About 5 or 6 years ago, in a local arts centre in Bristol called the Arnold Feeney, which holds 200 people, and he was playing with I think they're a Swedish kind of electronic, improvisation group called, I think they're called Supersonic. And he just turned up with his bass, and he'd been on tour with them. They'd done a week's tour, and he'd just been on tour with them, and basically just doing improvisation. They had those of electronic and kind of Apple Macs and kind of, but not kind of stadium tours or anything like that. Very experimental, very improvisational. So he's always been interested in those things as well, alongside his kind of career as bass player in the biggest blues rock band in the world, kind of thing. So. But anyway, I can't. Sadly, I can't remember. I can't ask my dad anymore. But how they actually met. But anyway, so he came to he lived in Totnes. He lived in Totnes then. So obviously they'd obviously got in contact. And so he came up to my mum and dad's house. So I was obviously in '85. This would have been '85 to talk about what they were going to do, stuff like that. So, and I was obviously there. So. Over, we had lunch and kind of all that. So in the end, obviously because I'm a Led Zeppelin fan, this is like, ooh, the man from Led Zeppelin's in the house. You have to get over that a bit. But
one of the best bass players in the world.
Well, indeed, yeah, fantastic bass and fantastic all-round musician. If you think what he's done in terms of his arranging and all of that. REM's Automatic for the People, all those '60s stuff he did. And all the stuff he did with Led Zeppelin, if they needed a part playing, John Paul Jones could play that. If it was recorders on on Stairway to Heaven, or it's keyboards on whatever. Later on he synthesized stuff, but yeah. So, and one of the things we talked, obviously talked about Led Zeppelin a bit, because I'm a fan of stuff, and he talked about Black Dog, and he came up with that riff, and he took it to the band, and they were a bit confused about, we said, yeah, John Bonham said, yeah, but it's fine, but it starts off in time, and then it goes out of time, then it goes in time again. And I can't drum to it because you have to change the drumming, every bar to kind of suit it. So they kind of messed about with it. And then he just said, you know what? I'll just play a 4/4 straight through it. And the riff will go in time, out of time, and then back in time as it goes through. It goes to the on beat, to the off, goes from the on beat to the off beat to the on beat again. So they decided that's what we can do. So anyway, in the midst of this, we've got a guitar. So I've got a guitar. So he's showing me how to, I think my memory was on my 12-string acoustic. He's showing me how to play this. This is how it goes. 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of thing. So he's actually showing me how to play Black Dog in my mum and dad's sitting room.
Oh my God.
So So anyway, off we go for 2 weeks in Huddersfield, doing all manner of workshops. And so my dad, as I said, he's got John Paul Jones, he's got Tony Robinson, he's got another actor as well, whose name I can't remember, who was in a British sitcom called Crossroads, much sort of almost comedic thing, because all the scenery used to wobble and stuff, and it was quite a funny thing. But and he also had a trombone player called Jim Fulkerson, and obviously John. So and off we went, and we set up. We set up in the various places, and school kids came and played with this stuff, and kind of had a go themselves, and kind of showed them how to use it, and then they did some creative stuff. My dad was really interested in spreading, the creativity word. Whatever your instrument, whatever you did, about being creative with the things that you had. And currently, in his legacy, that is a thing called sound beam, which is an ultrasonic. It's a little sort of sensor that produces an ultrasonic beam, which you link to a sound generator. So basically, you have this ultrasonic beam as a keyboard. So if you can break the sound beam, you can make a noise. Yeah. So you could set up as a keyboard, different sounds, whatever it is, different triggers, all manner of things. I mean, it has, it obviously has a performance. You can set these sensors up in different parts of a room, and then people can walk through them and trigger. So dancing and all that kind of gear. Or you can have it as a sort of therapy thing. So, for people with physical handicaps. That, if you can break the beam in some way with your foot, hand, ear, nose wiggle, anything you can conjure up, you can make a noise, and then you can react to it. You can do something else. So that's kind of one stretch. So he always been very interested in that kind of educational side of things and doing it, and this was part of that. So we did some concerts. In the evening. There were concerts. So we obviously, and John Paul Jones had bought this drumming piece. He had this kind of electronic drumming piece that he bought. So he did that, and my dad's, had a sax player called Jerry Underwood who came, and he did some sort of improvisation sax plus stuff, and Jim Fulkerson did some trombone, and Tony Robinson did some spoken word stuff and things. Yeah, but so we spent kind of I think it's probably only a week, but we spent a week in Huddersfield doing all these things with John Paul Jones.
So, when you're doing this at at this festival, are you on a stage, or are you down with the people because it's performance art and they're involved with what you guys are doing?
I don't think it was a stage. I think we were just at one end of a room, long room. We were at one end of it, set up, and my dad had all this kit. He had speakers. We used to take everything with us. So we went up in a van, jammed to the gunnels with speakers. And so we put a speaker in each corner of the room, kind of sort of surround sound kind of exercise, early surround sound, not really 5.1, more like 1.1, I think, probably. But, and, obviously because it was electronic music, with the sort of acoustic sound of the instruments that were being played, you're quite in control of what you can make quite a lot of noise with it without too much problem, really. You didn't need a big PA or anything like that. We had basically kind of, studio speakers, 3 foot high. And, and we kind of went and did these things in various kind of tram sheds and whatever else. But, alongside a lot of other people doing a lot of other things as well, this kind of thing. So it was a pretty cool, it's kind of, one of those kind of, and I'm sure a lot of cities have them, kind of arts weeks, if you like, so a lot of things are going on. Not only, my dad was a part of doing those things. So that's how I got. That's how John Paul Jones taught me how to play Black Dog by Led Zeppelin.
What did your dad think of
Led Zeppelin?
Computer what computers can do as far as music can do now? He must have been blown away by what you can achieve. To
some extent. Interestingly, his focus, if you like, and his angle on it, and you can hear it in if you listen to the Life on Earth stuff. It's completely there. My dad's philosophy, which is to take the sound that an instrument makes. So whether it's a clarinet or a flute or a violin, whatever, guitar, anything like, and then be able to manipulate it. So the start of it is somebody playing something. It's not just setting up, sequences within a keyboard and letting them run.
Okay. So it's not about the sound. There has to be the process of making the sound from. Okay.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So, and that whole thing about having a microphone with somebody playing an instrument, to hybridize that, so you get that human experience and that human emotion in the sound, is, I think, one of his fundamental things that he decided that's what he wanted to do. Hence the live thing, but also which he carried on. I mean, we did lots of other concerts, and till the sort of into the 2000s. But when he would do concerts and stuff in Bristol and things, and he did a whole show, kind of similar sort of thing, about Alan Turing. Do you know who Alan Turing is?
Yes.
The computer guy. So he did a whole kind of electronics kind of ballet show using the sound beams, which is just an extension of what we're doing. People playing live, dancers in a warehouse in Bristol.
Have you got this all documented and catalogued, Simon? Or
yeah, it's don't worry, my dad documented it all in triplicate. Since he died, my mum and my wife Caroline have spent a lot of time going through all this stuff and kind of going, we don't need 3 copies of this. But yeah, and it's been very interesting, because he's got all the stuff that he ever made. He's got all the 8-track recordings from Life on Earth. The old 1-inch 8 tracks. Do you remember? You probably don't remember those. Remember in the old days we had tape, 1-inch tape, with 8, 16, 24, 36 tracks on them. So he only did 8 tracks, but still got all the old 8-track recording stuff he's got in what used to be a studio in Bristol. And
so you know how Jimmy Page pulled out the bow?
Yeah.
Are you sure? I kind of think maybe John Paul Jones told him, "Hey man, don't grab a bow."
Interestingly, he didn't. It wasn't him. Hold on, I'm going to look it up because I can't, as usual, I can't remember what it is. But he got it from another group in the 60s. There was another band, and the guitarist in that band
was using a bow.
He played with a bow. And Jimmy Page must have seen him. He must have seen him doing it and thought, that's a really cool idea. Why wouldn't you? I'll do it too, kind of thing. And so he got it from somebody else, and he wasn't. It's not. It's fine, but he wasn't the first person to do it. And let's just see if I can quickly find it in a Page bow. But so I mean, I think because in the 60s, there's a lot of experimentation with sounds and all of that thing. And I think obviously one of the things you come up with is it's a stringed instrument. I wonder if I can if I can use it on a guitar. There we are. Eddie Phillips from a group called The Creation.
Never heard of them, Simon.
No. Well, I mentioned this last week. They were just another 60s band. But they had a song. This is funny. They had a song called Painter Man. Yeah.
Yes.
Which was a massive hit for a German group called Boney M.
Yes.
Do you know Boney M? Well,
yes.
Painter Man,
yes.
who wanna be a painter? Well, that is by The Creation. That is not by Boney M. If you go and listen to it, it's a 60s song.
I have heard the original.
Yeah, well, the guitarist on that is a guy called Eddie Phillips, and he was the guy who did the bow. And obviously, Jimmy Page, would have seen him around, and he would have gone, which is really cool. But so that's where Jimmy Page got it from, and it goes along with that experimenter because you also obviously the theremin is the other thing that Jimmy Page had, because that all that stuff in Dazed and Confused, that middle section of Dazed and Confused, all those noises. It's basically Jimmy Page, using a theremin to to make those noises. Do you know what a theremin is?
Yes.
It's one of those kind of rods, and it has a field, and you put your hands, but and it changes that. Yeah. So, and obviously that bow thing was completely alongside that kind of sonic sound kind of thing that they were all doing, not just Jimmy Page. That I think you kind of forget how experimental the '60s were because we're so far away from them now.
When were Pink Floyd doing all that experimental stuff with Syd Barrett? Was that 67, 68?
Yeah, 67, 68, same period, all the psychedelic thing. So with Syd Barrett, and then obviously with David Gilmour after that. But yeah, Syd Barrett, they definitely, because they used to play long improvised shows, a lot of it improvised, with kind of, lighting and oil things, all that kind of classic 60s things. There's some film of the Floyd doing very early things.
So there was some dovetailing there, obviously, with Pink Floyd, and that filtering through to some aspects of Led Zeppelin to a degree.
Completely. I think that all that cross fertilization and all those things, that, and you can see it later on in what Led Zeppelin did. In some ways, like for instance, Sandy Denny. I don't know if you know who Sandy Denny is.
Yes.
The singer from Fairport Convention who sings on Battle of Evermore.
Yes.
She was around then in the '60s, obviously, in Fairport and doing her own stuff. Fantastic singer, really fantastic singer, and songwriter as well. But they must have met, seen each other, gigged, all those things. So I think the scene probably. We think of it as like it is now, where it's massively disparate, music from everywhere, people in their bedroom, and you can't keep track of it at all. I think in those days, it was quite small and quite contained and quite, people, everybody knew everyone else. The classic example.
You're absolutely right. I'm reading this book here at the moment called The British Blues Work. Okay, and it argues exactly what you're saying. One of the reasons why these guys and girls were so good, and he's talking about the fans who were listening to the music and also people who went and produced the music. It's because they were conscious of who they were and made sure that they were articulating these links between traveling up and down the M1 that had been built, but they were certainly making efforts to come together in a group as opposed to what we probably thought that they were actually doing.
And I think there's much in what you say. I think that thing about you think about those bands traveling around in the '60s in wrecked old transit vans, and they would famously meet up on the M1, the Blue Boar, which was a sort of service station in inverted on their way back from gigs. And I think that's how it was. You went off to Newcastle, played a gig, you came back, you got to the Blue Boar at 6 a.m. You turned up. 5 other groups would turn up from various other places they've been to, Liverpool, Manchester, wherever else playing. And you'd all kind of see each other, get to know each other and things. And I think, as I say, that's they all knew each other. They all knew about each other. It wasn't.
Another thing that amazes me too, Simon, and I think you and I we spoke about this the last time that you were on. I think. Certainly a lot of Kiwis, a lot of New Zealanders don't realise this, that bands were playing in England in the 60s on a Monday night, on a Sunday night. And they were playing every night. Here in New Zealand, bands only played on a Thursday, a Friday and a Saturday night.
Yeah, and I think that's right. Yeah, through the night, and you maybe you do 2 gigs a night as well. So you go somewhere and do a gig, a 7 o'clock gig or whatever. You finish by, you do, and then you go somewhere else and do another gig. or they go back to London and do another gig or do a late night show, something like that. So, I think they work bloody hard and ran about. Do you want to? I have a. I only realised this recently, but talking of Black Dog, Black Dog goes da 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 da, has a riff, and then he sings,
Yes.
and then he has the riff, yeah. So you've got riff, sing, riff, yeah. What do you know another song by one of your favourite bands that does that? Quiz night. One of your favourite bands, one of your favourite guitar. One of your favourite guitar blues guitar players?
Clapton.
No, the other one.
Keith Richards.
Peter Green.
The Green. Is it the Green Manalishi?
No, the other one. Shape I'm in, and oh well does exactly that, doesn't it? You see, when you bloody say it, you go, oh yeah. See, Black Dog and Oh Well do exactly the same thing.
Oh, bloody hell, they do too.
That's where they got it from. They got it from Oh Well. So, hats off to Peter Green. But yeah, that play a riff, sing, play a riff. It's like, that's what Black Dog does. Oh yeah. They say then it plays the riff. See, as soon as you say it, you go, so it is. Weird.
Carl's going to kick himself.
Well, it's amazing, isn't it? It's completely astonishing that I think that, but it's a very good example of you get somebody has an idea, and it's perfectly legitimate, and you think that's a good idea. Oh, we could do that, So they do that, which I think is amazing. Really, myself, I think it's. I don't know if it is, but if it is amazing.
I think that's why we do this. It's this archaeology of making the connections, because jeepers, you know what I'm going to do after this show, don't you? After
you're going to play it, yeah.
I wish we could play it now, but unfortunately, we know what'll happen. Mr. YouTube will get upset, and
Mr. YouTube will get upset.
Yeah.
Well, indeed, yes. So it's I find that kind of fascinating. That I got another example of it as well, where that recycling. The Rain song by Led Zeppelin.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. You go and play that. Go and play the Rain song. The first two chords of the Rain song, are the same as Something by the Beatles. Because George Harrison said to Jimmy Page, the trouble with the Beatles is they got no bloody ballads. They got no slow songs. So when he went away and he wrote the Rain song, he put in the first two chords of Something. And you go and listen to the Rain song. It's the bloody. It's fantastically kind of. But you see that recycling. That idea is like, and I'm going to put a reference in to something in this song because George Harrison said you haven't got any bloody ballads. You need more ballads, mate.
I'm glad they listened to him.
well, completely. Yes, absolutely, completely. My other favourite thing, I'm gonna play this because no one will know. But if I play this, I won't show you what it is, or I'm just going to play just the first bit of it. Okay? You tell me what it is. All right. I'll just hold on. I can turn it up. So, come on.
Yep.
Right, do you know what that is?
Rock and roll?
Yeah. Except it's not rock and roll. It's Keep on Knocking. Keep on Knocking by Little Richard. That's where he got it from. That's where John Bonham got it from. Yeah, see, it's just fun.
Rock and roll.
Yeah.
I love that song.
Keep on knocking, but you can't come in. See, or you could do that. You see, I love that sort of thing. That's that kind of reference point. And I only discovered that recently. I mean, in the last couple of months, I just read it somewhere. I thought, really?
Wow.
So I went back listening to it. Good Lord. Because apparently they were jamming around in the studio and he was just playing it. And, and then they just started doing something else. Playing, Jimmy Page would play, rock and roll, not Keep on Knocking, but you can't come in. But yeah, that beginning drum beat is Little Richard. Was it probably there's a drummer called Earl Palmer probably did it, but
Wow.
it's amazing that, isn't it? But it gives you an inkling, an idea about, I think, those things, that how small the world is, in that world, that kind of rock and roll world and things, and how that cross fertilization of ideas and people doing things and, people going, that's a good idea. We should do something like that, And, the words of the great Tom Petty, the future was wide open. It was all there to be kind of, taken. And that includes, whatever kind of experimentation you wanted to do.
Can I ask you a question? So
Yeah, yeah.
let's go full circle then. Another 50 years.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
To 2018, we have a band called Greta Van Fleet.
Yep.
Now, I'm sure you and I, we've spoken about this before, but one of the things that really upsets the heck out of me is if you go to social media, if you have a look on Facebook pages, or if you go to Greta Van Fleet's YouTube, it's amazing the amount of people that kick them in the guts and say that you guys are just ripping off Led Zeppelin. That they're even taking photos of the young guy, the singer, how he turns his hand like this. And then they show a photo of
Robert Plant doing it.
Robert Plant doing the same thing, and so I've jumped on and I key in a couple of comments saying, but these guys have never said that they were that they were never influenced. I mean, these guys have always said that they were influenced by Led Zeppelin, right from the word go.
Yeah, and I think what the real thing that those people forget is that the first Led Zeppelin record, I think, it's pretty much all covers.
All covers.
Yeah, no, they didn't write the first album. They took blues songs and played them. Now, if you're doing that, you go, yeah, all right. So, and they got, let's face it, Jimmy Page got the idea for Led Zeppelin and that sound and doing that from Jeff Beck. Mm-hmm. Jeff Beck, if you go and listen to Truth, with Jeff Beck and Rod Stewart and Ronnie Wood on bass, and then that is the sound of Led Zeppelin. They do a version of You Shook Me as well, don't they, on it, I think?
Yep.
Which is like...
And we can go back a couple of years, or maybe to even to the John Mayall album with Eric Clapton. Where
completely,
so we can plot that lineage.
So you can Led Zeppelin didn't they copied other people. They did other things, and eventually, and I think one of the things about Led Zeppelin, one of the interesting things is that you can plot. The first album is done in a couple of weeks.
Yep.
Basic Street Studios in Island Records. Knock it off. Pretty much what they did live, they went and recorded. The second album, they're on the road, so it's a bit more expansive. There's a bit more kind of like acousticy things, but built into the record, that quiet loud bit. You get to the third one, right? Then they've done couple of years of solid touring, 2 albums. So they go and sit in a cottage in Wales, North Wales, without electricity. Now, that ambience is not on the road, kind of knocking out shows all the time. So what happens? Oh, they do a load of acoustic numbers. Oh, no surprises there, if you think about it. But obviously it's an expansion of their palette,
sure.
Doing different things, taking in some English folk music. They're good friends with Roy Harper, the English folk song singer. They obviously seen Fairport and all those things. They all kind of link it. You go, oh yeah, Fairport, they were doing that stuff as well. Oh yeah, so they were, And so they go to that, so they do Led Zeppelin 3, and then they do 4, which in some ways is a bit more straight ahead, but actually has Stairway on it, sure. Stairway to Heaven, which has, it has on side 2, it has mandolins, it has, still got that kind of Californian kind of, I always think of, the ocean and stuff like that. It's, Californian kind of feel, not quite sort of Joni Mitchell, but that kind of Californian strummy thing, and acoustic guitars. Then you get to 5, and then you start getting keyboards. Houses of the Holy. John Paul Jones is starting to play keyboards and, bring all that kind of thing into it.
Yep.
And then you get to, Presence, and, very much a sort of guitar album, but kind of orchestral guitar. So Jimmy Page, he's doing lots of overdubs, lots of, lots of stuff. And I
Four
think,
or five layers there.
yeah, I mean, the other interesting thing is at the Rain Song, they got Jones and Page both had got home studios, so they were able to work at stuff at home and then bring them to the band, which makes a difference in what you do, in the way you do things. It's not just get in the studio and jam, which is what the first two records are pretty much about. I think, bits to the third one probably. You still retain the basis of, yeah.
For the life of me, Simon, though, I can't understand why, if people are the rockers, or pay some kind of respect to Led Zeppelin, would want to give a young band, because these guys are young guys. They're only 19 or 20. They're young
20,
guys.
Yeah.
Grief because they sound pretty good. I like them. In fact, they're coming to they're touring New Zealand in February next year.
Yeah, completely. And I think so. Going back to the original point, as far as they're concerned, actually, it's fine. Why not? Everybody else, everybody steals from everybody else. Stealing is not the right word, but they take what other people have done. The art of it is to shape it into something so that it's you. So you're not just a Led Zeppelin pastiche band. You become Greta Van Fleet, the rock band, who do something in 2016. Plenty of time for that. Easy,
Yeah. Greta Van Fleet certainly do that. They're not a cover band,
No.
But that gives me comfort. That gives me comfort that I'm watching a band that is clearly influenced by bands that I love and grew up with, and to watch these young cats out there performing, actually plugging guitars in and banging drums and sweating.
yeah, completely. Yeah. And there are people out there. I slightly different, but the same thing. I went on Friday to, you might have seen it on my Facebook thing. I went to see a band called Buck and Evans. Well, Chris Buck, the guitar player, who's a great guitar. I love his guitar playing. He's an amazing player. He's got amazing touch and feel. I met him on this guitar breaks holiday I went on in April in Italy. I had a week in Italy playing guitar. Half a dozen of us in this country hotel in Italy. I can't recommend it highly enough. But if you want to get away for a week, and so the two kind of pro guitarists were Ariel Posen, the Canadian, who's a wonderful slide player and stuff, and Chris Buck. So he's a Welsh guy, and he lives not far from me. He lives about 50 miles from me. So he just brought out an album. And so they had a sort of album launch thing. So me and Dave, my bass player, we had a band outing to go and see them on Friday in this memorial hall in Wales. But the interesting thing about them, there's him. Chris is kind of 30-ish, so he's a young guy. The others are, the bass player and the drummer are 50.
Wow.
They're in every and Sally Ann Evans, the singer, she's not 30, and so there's a complete kind of cross section of ages. Now, what they are, interestingly, I bought the album. It's really good. I've played it a couple of times. I'm really impressed by it because it's an album I could have bought in 1974. Interestingly, you think, do you know what? I could have seen them in 1974 at the Colston Hall, playing in my local hall. They sound like a 70s rock band, which is really interesting.
Is that something that they've done consciously? This is how we want to sound, or have they just got together as a band, and this is the sound that's?
I think it's the sound that they make, and what each of those guys brings to that. The drummer and the bass player. As I say, they're kind of 50, so they bring a different perspective. So they probably bring more of a perspective, a lot closer to mine. So they brought up in the 70s, so that So they bring that sort of thing, and obviously Chris brings, a myriad of guitar things. He plays quite a lot with his fingers. He kind of has this thing where he'll play with his pick and play with his fingers, and he'll just tuck his pick in the crook of his first finger. if you watch him, you go and watch him on. He just flicks back forth in a really natural way. But he has a kind of Knopfler-ish, Mark Knopfler's kind of that finger thing that he plays that gives it a real feel.
Well, what's the name of the band, Simon? Because I'm going to search them on Spotify.
They are called Buck and Evans.
Buck.
So Buck. Their latest album is not on Spotify yet. I mean, it's not even. I mean, it's just about out. They were
Buck and Evans.
Buck and Evans.
Live
if you look at
live at
Rockfield. Live at Rockfield. Yeah, I think that was done 2 or 3 years ago. So maybe not that representative of what they do now. You might be better off looking at something on YouTube. There'll be some YouTube clips of them for sure.
Okay. Look, I'm fascinated by your description, because I'm certainly going to check them out, because that's fascinating. If they are in that groove.
Yeah, they're kind of interesting, I think it's a really good record. As I say, I didn't really know what to expect, because I've only ever seen Chris playing on his own, which is a bit, different from a band context. But yeah, it was really good. I really enjoyed it as a thing. Can I say just Metal Stage O? How you doing? Hope you're good. I come from Bristol, which is in the west of the UK. I live in a village about 15 miles southwest of Bristol. So that's where I come from. Hi, Bass Hiroshima Nick. And thanks for dropping by. Sorry, I just saw in the chat there. Metal Stage O asked me where I was from. Cambridge is the other side of England. Up in the fens.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Bass Hiroshima. We were talking the other day. So Bass Hiroshima said that they were going to jump on and check out what you had to say. So Bass Hiroshima has to watch it from the start.
We'll find out. Yeah, completely. It's so going back to the sort of So I think that they take stuff, they make it their own. In exactly so. I have nothing but admiration for anybody who can make any kind of living making music in 2018. It's a basic admiration about because it's really difficult. It's very and all those guys who are just doing it, whoever they are, almost, whether I like it or not is another matter. But even the kind of pop band stuff and even all that stuff, the stuff that my kids listen to, the stuff that drives me nuts because because it has no swing, basically. The things that, but there is still a creative process in there. Somebody had to, get an idea, make it a musical thing, write some words, do some stuff, release it. It takes some, in these days, that's quite difficult to do. You've got to find someone to release it, and and that goes for the pop stuff. It goes for people like Buck and Evans, who are going out. Chris does YouTube stuff. He does stuff for Anderson's TV. He'll do this kind of guitar breaks holiday. He did another similar thing with an English guitar player called Bernie Marsden.
Bernie's Marsden? Legend.
He played with Whitesnake and has the legendary Les Paul, the Beast.
Yes, the Beast. That's right.
Yeah, and he's got a new book out all about all of his guitars as well, which I think would be really interesting.
I'll have to check that out. There's a lot of clips with Bernie, and he looks like he's just such a nice guy. He answers people's questions. He has a real passion.
Yeah, he's a cool guy. Yeah, absolutely. So, Chris has done some stuff with him, similar sort of thing. So they have lots of strings to their bow, but they're still doing stuff. Still making a go of it, and still seeing. We were talking earlier about YouTube and things. But seeing that's one income stream. Another one is whether I can teach. Go on these lessons. Another one is I make music, do gigs. And I take my hat off to them because it's a bloody hard world. These days in 2018 to be doing that, and to kind of figure I can make a living doing this. I mean, it's not any better now than it was then. It's just different. In those, as we were saying earlier, in those days, they got in a van, they went up the M1, played a gig in wherever for, I don't know, 50 quid or something, drove back through the night, sleeping on their amps in the car, not much to eat, not much to, and quite dangerous because obviously 60s road, 60s cars, not that great.
Sure. Yeah, look,
and without getting a lot of money, and until you got into it. Somebody posted on my Facebook page? I don't know if you saw it. They posted up the fees that the bands got at Woodstock.
yeah, I read that.
Did you see that? Yeah.
Yeah, Jimi Hendrix
yeah.
got the most, didn't he?
Was it $10,000 or 50? Anyway, but did you notice? I put a comment in about actually down the bottom was a band called the Keith Hartley Band. Yeah, who got $500 to play, but their fatal strategic error was they didn't sign the disclaimer to say they could be in the movie. So no one ever remembers that Keith Hartley Band played at Woodstock because they don't appear in the movie.
Oh,
It's like, you gotta be kicking myself for 50 years like that,
Yeah.
It's bizarre, that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing. I had a friend of mine who was in a Beatles tribute band. Now this is before the YouTube internet, and they toured America for about 6 months. And it was interesting when I caught up with Sebastian about 3 or 4 years after they did their tour. And he said what was really amazing about the Americans is that they loved live music. Now this was in the early 1990s when they were touring. And they were just playing in like small bars. But
clubs,
very good, a tight band. And he was just blown away by it. Didn't matter what part of America that they were in, whether it was on the East Coast, the West Coast, or the North or South. It was just this appreciation of live music.
Yeah, absolutely, and lots of places to play of different sizes.
Yeah, some places that they played, like they would get asked to come back and get paid, and some of the bars that they played in. It was quite interesting. He was saying that a lot of bars would have PAs and everything set up, and bands will come in, and you might have one amp or something, but bars would have the equipment, and you would
even
pay
bars
for
would
tips.
have a backline.
Yeah.
Put the hat down.
Put the hat down.
Yeah.
And if you were good, you'd make a lot of money.
Yeah. That's really interesting. That even in the 90s, that people were doing that, and I guess that's how a lot of people. I presume that's what Nirvana and all those other guys did. They went out in a van and they went and played in bars. Put the hat down, see what if you got anything.
Yeah.
Gradually you build up a name for yourself, don't you? Because you go back. But yeah, I think that's really interesting. Even in the 90s, they were still doing that.
Yeah, well, it was interesting.
Time-honored tradition.
Sebastian, not long after they arrived, they bought this piece of crap, and I forget where they were, what part of the States, but they were driving along. Anyway, one of the indicators didn't work, so there was a cop behind them who pulled them over, and so they pulled over. And here in New Zealand, you jump out.
Not in America. Very bad idea.
They opened the door and they're going to jump out, and the guys pulled out their gun and said, "Hey, stop!" And
absolutely.
You don't get out of your car.
No, you don't get out of your car. Stay with your car and keep your hands on the on the steering wheel. My brother did that. My brother had a not dissimilar experience of that kind of cultural difference. He went into when he first went, and he went there to build boats in the late 70s. But he said he went into this. He went to a shop to buy something, and there was nobody else there, so he just parked outside the store. Yeah, but he parked just across the bays, the parking bays. And when he came out, there was a policeman there going, "Well, because he was like a getaway driver." I thought he was robbing the place. Well, you see what I'm saying? What? No, we're just waiting to buy something. You know, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah, we'll don't park like that because it looks like you're about to drive off in a hurry. Because he parked across the base, not to. And so, yeah, so you've got to be careful. Though this is funny though. Yeah, see, America speaks the same language as us, except they don't. Culturally,
Oh,
all those little differences.
Very different. Very different.
Yeah. Yes.
I
really interesting. All of that.
I enjoy listening to some of Carl's stories too. He spent a lot of time in Texas, and he went over there with hopes to break into the music business, and you've got to be very good, because he said to me, Andrew, there's 10 guys in a row that can play Stevie Ray Vaughan licks like that.
Yeah,
they're a dime.
I was going to say
there's a dime a dozen.
Yeah, I was going to say he went over there and found 1,000 other guitarists like him. Yeah. Because it's huge and completely. And I think that that's a different kettle of fish. Trying to make it in America, as you say, it's being a big fish in a small pond, isn't it? And then being a small fish in a bloody big pond.
He had a good swim though. He enjoyed his swimming.
Yeah, well done. Well, yeah, and that's the way you've got to look at it, haven't you? I didn't make it, but would I do it again? In a heartbeat, I would. I'd be back at her in a heartbeat. Yeah. Which what goes back to the thing I was saying earlier. You have to say yes to things. Especially, so that you can go out and at least you can come out and say, you know what, I had a go, I had a laugh. I got some stories to tell, which I think is, is really cool. Yeah.
Hey, so what kind of guy was John Paul Jones like? When you were chatting with him, like just one of the guys.
Completely, yeah. I mean, he's quite, he's a very quiet, sort of. He has a certain presence about him, but he's a pretty quiet, ordinary guy. Yeah. If you met him in the street, you wouldn't know that he'd been in one of the biggest rock bands in the world. I know he said, that he used to, because he was quite more anonymous, he could get out, Plant and Page couldn't go out, but he said I could put on a hat, pair of sunglasses, and go out in the towns we went to, go and have a wander around, kind of have a look, because people didn't necessarily recognize him very much. And if what it's like in those days, they didn't do television and they didn't do singles, so they weren't on top of the pops or anything like that. So, playing the stadium, you're able to, and there's only pictures of you in the music press. So in effect, you can make yourself not look like the music press photograph quite easily. So I think he just used to go out, and kind of, and do stuff, and because he's able to do it.
There's in the early 2000s, late 1990s, 2000s, Simon, there was a band from a town called Cambridge, which is about 30 k's from where I live, called the Datsuns. And the Datsuns, the Datsuns were pretty big in the UK for a couple of years. Yeah. And they went to the UK, and John Paul Jones produced their second album.
Right, he did produce their album, didn't he? Yes, he did. Yeah.
And it's interesting because a couple of guys that I used to hang out with, a guy called Joe Rowell, he was good friends with the lead singer who was the bass player, and his name, I can't remember his name. Anyway, I remember seeing him at a bar when they came back, and Hamilton, Cambridge, it's a local scene, so it was pretty good. And I remember we were asking him, what's it like, with John Paul Jones, and he said they were intimidated as heck, because,
to start with,
because their biggest influence in their lives growing up was Led Zeppelin. In fact, their first sets were just all Led Zeppelin songs. But it's interesting. It's interesting though that he was very. They said he wanted. He had a clear vision of what he wanted, and was
Yeah,
quite clear about what he wanted. He didn't apparently want to have too much of a discussion about changing something. He'd already had a plan, and
yeah, 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 yeah.
and this is what we're gonna do, and they
Yes,
like that.
well, I think that's fine. That's what a producer's supposed to do, isn't it? You know, you send him your songs, and he says, she says, yeah, we're going to do that one, that one, that one, that one. You know, we're
Yep.
going to work on those. I've got a clear idea about what they should sound like, what direction it's going. I mean, that must come from the old days being a session musician and doing all those arranging and stuff like that. You get a clear idea about what you want to do. From all of that, I think that sounds completely compatible. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's absolutely got a quiet kind of in-depth knowledge and a quiet kind of uh, understanding of what you want and where you're going to go with it and all that kind of thing. And I think
Did,
that would be John Paul Jones completely. Yeah.
did he tell you what his favorite instrument was? Did you ask him what? Did he have a favorite instrument?
Not that I remember. No, it's a long time ago. But no. Well, I mean, I think I mean, obviously, he plays a lot of instruments. Because
Yeah.
his parents were musicians. And kind of. So that's why Led Zeppelin got him to play everything. John could play that. So he'd pick it up and learn how to play it. But I think that he's adept at lots of different instruments.
So
But
Led
seemingly,
Zeppelin could read music. The members that they were music readers.
John Paul Jones can read music for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's done. And I think he was brought up in that kind of traditional music household. So I think he can read. I don't think Jimmy Page can read music. I think Jimmy Page is more of an intuitive player. So he knows, but he couldn't necessarily explain it in a musical language. Whereas, and I don't think Plant and Bonham can read music at all. But they know stuff, of course. I mean, Robert Plant knows a lot of stuff, but no. So I think there's a as ever with these things. But I think Jones is the one because he did the arranging. He did lots of kind of string arrangements and in the '60s for lots and lots of people. Donovan, lots of hits had his string arrangements on them. And so, if you're going to do string arrangements, you've got a kind of you've got to better write out, what you want them to play. I think there's no getting around it. You've got to write out what you want to play when you go to a session and be very clear about what you want people to play. Because obviously, they would do 5 sessions a day kind of thing. You go off, and you do, you'd record a song in an hour kind of thing. And then you do an orchestral bit. So you'd have the orchestra. Here's your parts. 1, 2, 3, 4. Off you go. Come in now. So I think that yes, he can read music and has that kind of classic music training behind him, so that he can do that, which has helped him
So
a
what
lot.
motivated them to go from the safety of and a regular, I suppose, income of being studio musicians to the hectic lifestyle of being touring musicians? Do you know? Do you
Well, I
know?
think I do actually. Yeah, I mean Jimmy Page particularly. Jimmy Page had a kind of he'd done sessions for 5 years. There was in 5 years he played on hundreds of things. There were there were two guitarists. There's Big Jim and Little Jim. Big Jim Sullivan and Little Jimmy Page, and they played on hundreds of sessions. And I think that eventually that life is as wearing, but in a different way as anything else. You play on things you don't even know what they are. And you just go and play on anything. And it's not what you like. And this is a grand jump, by the way, which I recognise. But I kind of recognise it in that I played in a covers band for a long time. I still do, but a different kind of. I played in a kind of wedding party band for a long time, and we played all sorts of things that like Amy Winehouse songs and all sorts of stuff that I would never. I don't have in my record collection, not really, and it was a good education. But after a bit, you go, you know what? I really want to play the songs that I like, and I have it in my record collection. And I think that was Page's. He kind of decided he was going to stop being a session musician, and I don't know if this is a bit apocryphal, but the next week the gig came up playing bass with the Yardbirds. So he went and played bass with the Yardbirds. Then, when Jeff Beck was still in the Yardbirds, then they had, for a few months, they had the twin guitars, Beck and Page. That would have been something. Before Jeff Beck surprisingly left. He's flighty like that, is Mr. Beck. But leaving Jimmy Page with the remnants of the Yardbirds and a Swedish tour, which he had a book, was already booked. So he went with the remnants of the Yardbirds and played that. And then he thought, well, I think the other guys were not that keen, but he thought, well, maybe I'll get a band together and carry on. I said last week, Paul Samuel Smith took out an injunction against him, so he couldn't use the new Yardbirds name, so he had to find another name for it. But so in the meantime, the same sort of position, John Paul Jones was also. So I think Jimmy Page kind of put the word out. He asked famously Terry Reid, the British singer guitar player, to join. Terry Reid didn't want to do it because he just had his own record out, but he recommended Robert Plant. He's obviously seen him. I think they came from the Midlands. And said, go and check out this bloke. And obviously Robert Plant knew John Bonham. So, but John Paul Jones, he only rang up Jimmy Page and said, can I come and play bass? Because his wife harassed him into it.
That's correct.
She said, you're fed up with doing sessions. Why don't you go and do something with Jimmy Page? Go and ring him up and harass him, So that's how they kind of, they were obviously in the same position of, I've done 5 years of this. I want to go and do my own thing, go and, and famously they got in a room and played, Train Kept a Rolling, and there was magic there, the four of them,
So the first point of membership for anything that Page was doing was obviously a lead singer. He needed to get a lead singer first, and then
yes, absolutely, yeah.
And who bought John Bonham? Did John
Plant? Plant bought John Bonham.
Plant bought Bonham
because they were Midlanders.
Yes,
they played in Birmingham, and they had obviously played in bands together. So he came and said, "I know a really good drummer," and of course he's a fantastic drummer, John Bonham. The rock drummer and I think that I'd say the reason I say that is Todd Flowers. Good morning. How you doing? The reason I say that is I think he had swing. John Bonham could swing, and I think that's a rarity in rock drumming. He had the role.
Was John Bonham a jazz? Was he a jazz drummer?
His heroes amongst his Gene Krupa, one of his heroes, and so he was brought up on. He got his first snare drum when he was like 10 or something, 12. But he was brought up on those guys, those drummer guys, and obviously. His big hit, one of his big hits was, jazz drummers, and doing all of that. So completely. And he's a big kind of Motown fan and stuff. Him and John Paul Jones are big Motown fans, and so not only bringing that rock thing, but understanding that, you needed to have that swing, to play, and that thing about if he doesn't swing, people won't dance to it.
And also too, Simon, the reason why a drummer has to have swing, especially in that kind of band, because they only had one guitar player, so there's no rhythm.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, the classic grown-up is, so you have to be the rhythm section. Well, I mean, let's make an exception here. Unless you're the Who.
Yeah.
Where Pete Townsend was the rhythm section, and and John Entwistle played the bass guitar with the emphasis on the guitar, not the bass bit, and Keith Moon played all around, and and Pete Townsend was the rhythm section, which is a bit of a weird, but they muddied the waters. But you're absolutely right. But I think the key thing, and I think that I can make a case for this, that, and I said this to you, and it made me laugh when I was learning Route 66, and it like speeds up by 20%.
You were saying it speeds up.
Have you listened? You should listen to it. When I was playing, it just made me laugh. But the brilliant thing about Charlie Watts, he's another one. He's got swing. He swings. It's not just
Yeah.
And I think that these days, one of the interesting things is that music these days, especially the stuff with the modern pop stuff, electronic drums. I don't understand it, and the reason I don't understand it is because it doesn't swing. My kids listen. They're 12 and 14, my younger daughters, and they listen to the local, latest pop stuff, Ariana Grande or whatever. And the reason I don't get it is because it doesn't swing, because it doesn't have a real drummer on it. So you're absolutely on the beat every time, and it doesn't vary in time, rhythm, anything.
I agree with you, Simon. I'm a Eric Clapton nut, and some of those albums that he did in the 80s, August, for example, Journeyman's a different album. That's a great album, but August, where they use he's using the drum machine. It's just horrible.
Yeah. See, and then it goes, and you go, what happened to that? And then you realise it's it's not got a real drummer on it and stuff. It's got a drum, which, not saying the drum machine doesn't have its place and doesn't have a thing. All those 80s bands, kind of electronic bands from the 80s. Did stuff like that, but
a perfect example of a drummer playing swing is on the Get Your Yayas album where Under My Thumb, where the Stones are playing a slowed down version of Under My Thumb, and you've got and you're right. It's just you listen to the drumming and you can hear the drumming swing.
Yeah,
you can actually
swings.
You can. It's
absolutely, and I noticed it. Well, what's interesting, that thing about, and I'm sure that there's a line in this, because I'm older. I was brought up in the days pre all of that, where the drummer set the tempo. So
yes.
I kind of feel when a piece of music, like they speed up in the choruses a bit, and slow down in the verses a bit, and those kind of variations. And you don't notice them, but you do. You feel them. So, which is why I find modern music very difficult, because it doesn't do that. Because it's all done to click tracks, and so very much more on the beat and very much less of that. After 1980, records never sped up because of click tracks. Because they producers and were able to control how fast you went, and set it, and the drummer played to those, and you can play around them, and people, it's still fine. Not quite, as I say, but they never sped up and slowed down. I think if when you're a kid, I was 14 in 1972, you're brought up on that actually it's quite difficult when you get later on. The bands, when they start doing click tracks, they start doing. I don't feel it. I don't feel it swing in the same way. It doesn't move in the same way.
So your bass player that you play with,
Dave,
is he quite loose? Is he a loose because you like that swing? So does he play loose?
No, he's quite an organised, tight bass player, Dave. And the interesting thing about playing with guitar with backing tracks is, that it doesn't swing so much, but you're tight. Yeah. So we are where we are. I mean, there's just the two of us. There's very few. We don't argue about musical differences. We just get on with it, which is fine.
Sure.
And I think these days, lots of people play backing tracks. It's no longer any stigma about it. Nobody seems to care when we go out and play. I notice it a bit, and I would, I'd like it to be a kind of 4-piece, a band. But we are. We have a great time, and I do really enjoy it. And these days the drum tracks and what people are doing are pretty good. But no, Dave's a quite tight, organised bass player. He's he likes it to be structured and organised, and how does it go, and and we work quite a lot on. May not seem like it, but we work quite a lot on. Parts. If I'm doing a solo, we work on making sure that we arrive at the same place in that solo, together, kind of thing. What note are you playing there? So we've got to get down to B, and I'm playing F sharp, whatever. And so we work on that. We work on being tight, and that's what playing with drums. That's what it gives you, the backing tracks. It gives you tight, it's not loose, and you can't improvise, and you can't kind of go off, but in sort of muck about, but it just makes you tight, which is fine, And to be honest, I prefer to be doing what I'm doing now, playing Tom Petty and something like that, than I would in my previous band with a live drummer, to be honest. you know, I'll forego it. You know, everything's a compromise, and that's the compromise which, you know, I'm happy to make. But, you know, I recognise that, you know, backing tracks don't quite have the same swing as a you know, somebody hitting them kind of thing.
Well,
It's
it's that
interesting.
interaction. It's that interaction that you miss too.
Yeah.
You know, like I was saying to Pepper yesterday, you know, when Carl and I were playing with a guy called Chris, who was a drummer, he was exceptional. He just had a small kit, a basic kit, but he would tell us, well, you know, he would set the tempo.
Yeah.
It was, you know, he was the boss.
Yeah, completely. Yeah.
And
Somebody
the
has to
reason
be.
why he was the boss is because his formative years, you know, he was playing in what they call like a social club. He was playing, and on Saturday nights they would have dances, and they'd put the talcum powder on the floor, and they'd just have a band there. And so, and Chris would just play just basic pattern,
Yeah.
and you know, he had shitloads of money. Because people would want, you know, people would come and they'd want to dance, you know, do but he was getting paid good money, and all he was just doing was just sitting there, doing the sweep. What is it? The sweep drumming when they use the brush, the
brushes. Okay,
So it was, yep.
Yes.
So I know what you mean when you say firsthand from a drummer that's got that. I wouldn't say it was a jazz influence, but certainly that just keeping that timing because people were dancing. So you just had to be on. You had to have that swing, Simon. Otherwise, people weren't going to dance.
Otherwise, they don't dance. And going back to John Bonham, that was one of the things that you know, the early days, you know, that kind of set them apart is that because he drummed the way he did and he swung. I'm 60, Sonia. Don't nail yourself to that mast. That's a very bad idea. So, you know, that people danced at Led Zeppelin concerts. You know, people danced to the things they were doing because they swung, which is kind of weird these days, you know. And you don't realise it, but yeah, they danced, you know.
Wow.
And that's I remember, you know, reading that they found that really interesting, you know, because he swung, you know. And I think that was really important to them, that he had that kind of swing thing that he could do. And obviously John Paul Jones as well, you know, they locked in together that and they could do a kind of a sort of dance thing, you know. So yes, Sonia, bad luck.
Sonia's just a little bit so over 62.
Todd's catching me up. Yeah, bad luck, Todd. Somehow 59 seems a lot younger than 60. I have to say. I don't know why. When it starts with a 6, that seems to be a bad idea all the way around. But yeah, so I think that drumming is a key thing in the development of, you know, what they did and you know how they worked, you know, and finding somebody who could, you know, I'm sure Page and Jones thought he swings, yeah, absolutely, you know, and that's a really difficult thing to do, you know. Having that fantastic. I mean, you know, that's why he's one of my favourite drummers, because it's not only the power, it's the you know, it's having that swing, the roll, not just the rock. And I would say that, you know, Charlie Watts had the same, you know, the same thing. He's got the roll, not just the rock.
So Sonia's saying someone's over-experienced. So she's saying that she's over-experienced or that you're over-experienced?
I'm not answering that question. Can you be over-experienced?
Because my argument is that you never have enough experience.
That's what Jimi Hendrix would. If he made an album now, that's what it would be called.
Are you experienced?
Are you over-experienced?
Oh my God!
Oh dear. But
Simon, it's been wonderful.
I'm gonna tell you one story before we go.
Sure.
I've got to tell you a Led Zeppelin story. This is one that John Paul Jones. Yeah, John Paul Jones told me a Led Zeppelin story. It got to start. And he said that when they were on tour, that John Bonham would take, to entertain himself. This won't surprise you. He'd take a record player, and he'd have a kind of PA in his room, massive kind of sound system in his room, and he would play records of the day, whatever he liked, and he'd play them over and over again. Like I don't know.
No, he was a fan. He was a music fan.
Yeah. I was a music fan completely. Yeah. I mean, I think they all were. They're all music fans. And they all liked. I mean, I think that's what makes them why they had such diverse, made such diverse records and had such a diverse outlook on this. So they had West Coast influences, British folk, obviously blues, and you mix all those things. They were interested in, later on, their later albums. John Paul Jones played, synthesizers and all sorts of things. They moved constantly, and changed. So anyway, so he used to have this bloody great stereo, and he'd play it very loudly, and the band would say to the tour manager, in any hotel, we don't want to be anywhere near John when he's blooming stereo, because we don't want to hear it. So anyway, so they stay in this hotel, and he's got I can't remember what the record was, but let's say it's Bill Withers' record or something. It was a kind of soul record, right, which he played at massive volume, and they all got kept awake by it. They were like that bloody tour manager. So they go down the tour. And they go, "We told you we didn't want to be anywhere near John, and we can hear him." He said, "You're not anywhere yet. You're 12 floors away."
Oh my God. And they could still hear it.
Still hear him clear as day. It's lovely, yeah. Make a lot of noise, dear me. Jimmy T, I have never spent a week with Michael Jeffrey, I don't think. I'm not sure who Michael Jeffrey is either, but I don't recognise the name off the top of my head. But so that's just a funny story that he told us about, kind of thing. But I'm always interested by, that Led Zeppelin are kind of painted as a kind of, traditional thing. But, their later stuff, what Jimmy Page was doing on their later stuff, is a world away from, it has its roots, but in many ways it's a completely different, you go to listen to Presence and stuff like that, there are still things that link back to them, but, things like Achilles' Last Stand and stuff like that are, they're a continuation of what he was doing, a guitar orchestra thing, lots of overdubs, lots of different guitars, lots of different parts to the song, and stuff like that, which is a continuation of what he did, but, also taking it into new territory, new sounds, all those kinds of things. I think is really interesting for him.
There's a clip on YouTube where a reporter's asking Jimmy Page about his music. It must be in the late 70s. Asking him about whether or not his music is heavy metal, and he said, "No, it's not. It's not heavy metal. It's folk music, just played with different instruments." And when he said folk music, I made the connection straight away of blues, because blues is a type of folk music. So again, he's telling the truth. The music that they play, it's just instead of with like an acoustic guitar, they're playing an electric guitar.
Completely, and I understand, and I never thought that Led Zeppelin were a heavy metal band.
I used to get into arguments with guys at school, Simon. I agree. They're not heavy metal. They're a rock band.
Yes, they're a rock band, and that's about all. I'll go no further than that. They play rock music, but it's certainly not heavy metal. And I still wonder about that sort of. You see, I think Black Sabbath are the proto heavy metal band, having seen them both. In a way that I don't think Led Zeppelin are. And I don't think that the first two albums are rock albums for sure, but I don't think anything on those is what I would call metal in any way, shape, or form. And
Right.
you get to the third album, and that's got loads of acoustic stuff on it. And I don't think that Led Zeppelin 4, I mean, Led Zeppelin 4 has, Black Dog and rock and roll on it. Well, rock and roll is rock and roll. And the other side is much more kind of American, I think, West Coast influence, the
Were they
ocean.
ever
And
tempted, Simon, to continue the band when Bonham died?
I don't think they probably considered it. They probably considered it, but who were you going to get? I mean, that's the problem, isn't it? And that's one of their perennial problems that they've had, and I think it's one of the reasons they haven't got back together. Is and they can use Jason, and Jason's a really for that one-off gig they did in 2008 at the O2 Arena. But when you've played with that guy for 15 years or whatever, and you have that behind you, everything else is going to be second best, isn't it? And I understand that there are different drives in that, and I think that probably Jimmy Page would love to have carried on a band of some kind, because I feel like he's been the one who's probably been most left behind by the end of Led Zeppelin, because he's kind of struggled around, but he did The Firm, didn't he, with Paul Rodgers, and he played a bit with the
Coverdale Page is a good album.
Yes, Coverdale Page, and he did that stuff with Robert Plant in the 90s, Walking to Clarkstown, all of that. But he's never kind of settled into having another band in that way that he had Led Zeppelin. And I think that, the hankering he still hankers to do something, because that's nobody else. He hasn't been able to do anything ever since. Robert Plant has had a very successful solo career.
Absolutely.
Doing his own thing, fantastic, forging out what he wants to do, and is an amazing artist, really. And John Paul Jones does what John Paul Jones wants to do. He plays with who he wants to do. He produces the people he wants to produce, and he has a kind of other, as we've talked about, that kind of other more avant-garde life that he can go out and play and things and be part of stuff. I don't think Page really has ever had that. So all he ends up being is the curator of the Led Zeppelin Museum.
So what's Page doing? Because his daughter is posting pictures or photos of Jimmy Page with his 70s rig in some studio in London. So what does that mean?
Basing Street Studios, probably.
Yeah. So
recorded one or two.
They're recording something.
I don't think he's recording anything myself. I don't know. I've not seen him, so I don't know. But my guess, what will he do next? He might do something. I mean, he spent the last few years doing remastering all the Led Zeppelin stuff, and they've just done The Song Remains the Same, haven't they? They've just sort of finished that. And with other people, and he's done Celebration Day, and he's done what's next? Maybe another some later live stuff or something like that. But
because there was some talk early in the year that they were going to get together. There was a lot of talk, Simon.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see. I don't see. I think Jones would probably do it. John Paul Jones would do it. I don't think Robert Plant would do it. You know what? And I have a good reason why. I think that he quite rightly says, I don't want to sing songs that I wrote when I was 19. I'm not that guy anymore.
And I think there's also
conjure up the image of that guy to sing those songs, because they're quite kind of, young man songs, out on the road, and then when you're 72 years old, do you want to be singing that stuff like that? And I take my hat off to him for not, saying, what? And I'm not saying this is true, but I take my hat off him. It was him saying, I can't do it. I'm not doing it. I can go back and do little bits of it and mess about in the current band. I can make things with my current band. I can do different versions of stuff. But to go back and do that kind of 4-piece, rock band blues thing where I've got to stand out the front, bare chested, and kind of, it's like, I'm 70 years old, man. It's like, I can do that kind of much more kind of folky, kind of world music-y type thing fits
I'm
in
going
with
to
where
say,
I am as a
Simon, that
man.
I don't want to see it. And I'll tell you why I don't
No,
want
not
to
really.
see it. And I think there's some professional integrity there too, because again, again, I'm probably going to get a bit of crap for this, but when Van Halen reformed with David Lee Roth after they came out with a different kind of truth, and they released that live album in Japan.
Mhm.
Gosh, Simon, it's a hard out. I can't listen to it, Simon. David
Yeah,
Lee
see,
Roth's vocals are bad.
yeah, yeah, and quite rightly, you can't sing. Robert Plant cannot sing like he sang when he was 19.
Uh,
And
yeah,
and then having to compromise that, I think is, as I say, I had off to him because I don't think he's not interested in doing that, and I don't think there's no point in going. I can do three-quarters of it. What's the
yeah.
point in that, So whereas I think Jimmy Page, because he's not had any other bands really, still hankers after that because that's he's just become, as I say, the keeper of the Led Zeppelin flame, but that turns you into curator at the museum kind of thing, because he didn't go out and play live, whereas Robert Plant goes out and plays live and does whatever he wants, doesn't he? Travels around,
He's certainly the star on it. Might get
top
loud
man.
in here. That
Yeah, yeah.
that film with the Edge
Completely.
and
Oh yeah. Oh yes. He's still got the charisma. He's still a great player. Got it all. But he doesn't have a musical context into put that, and I think that's sad, really, in some ways. He actually hasn't managed to do that.
awesome. Hey, Simon.
Jimmy T. You mean Alan Jeffries, not Michael
Alan
Jeffries.
Jeffries.
Alan
Yeah.
Jeffries. He's just
Alan,
come
the
to me.
bass
Sorry.
player. Alan
Yes.
Jeffries, the bass player.
No. Alan Jeffries was the producer. He was the producer of Jimi Hendrix.
The
I don't know if he was in
producer.
MI5, but yeah.
Yeah, who was the manager of Jimi Hendrix?
The original manager was Chas Chandler, bass player
Chaz.
from the Animals.
Yeah, the Animals.
Yeah. But then Alan Jeffries, I think sure it was Alan Jeffries, took it over kind of. But he also kind of was his producer and stuff. And yeah, he's an odd character too, but, amongst other people.
I'm going to sign off, Simon, if that's okay.
It's fine. It's 7:05, so I've got to go and get my children up from school and
Awesome.
do.
I've really enjoyed this,
stuff.
and I appreciate you coming on. I'd like to just give you one last thing to think about. Probably, if you can, maybe Carl and I would like to have a Fleetwood Mac, Peter Green Fleetwood Mac show. So.
Why not?
So would love you to be part of that.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I'd love to come on and talk about that. We can produce our bombshell about to Carl. Yes. Don't tell him. Well, if he does it, he won't watch it. If he doesn't watch this, he'll never know. Will he?
No, he won't. He's too busy. I'm going to do a shout out, and then I'm going to ask you to sign off if that's okay. So, Sean Zinnerman. Has just Sean. Popped in to Jimmy. Say g'day. Shout out to Carl. Yeah, that's right. G'day, Todd. Yeah. Sonia, always a pleasure to see you, and you made us laugh with a couple of your comments in the chat. Yes. That's awesome.
Thanks,
Are
Sonia.
You over-experienced?
The new album from Jimi Hendrix. Yes.
Yeah. I'm going to be asking people that question tomorrow. Todd.
Yeah.
Who else? R2, R3 for jumping in. Bass. Yeah. Hiroshima Nick, thank you.
Yeah.
R2, I think
Nick,
that's all.
Thank you very much. It's been great.
Oh, and Arvin and Ben.
Of course, Arvin and Ben right at the beginning. I think. Yeah. Cool. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for hanging out with us.
Yeah. Take care. See you soon.